Maybe I should get into hotel Wi-Fi programming. It's a possibility. All right, let's see. Let's see what my packet drops are. Okay, it claims 0 drop frames. Claims 0 drop frames, which is much better than the last hotel. So we will see. We will see what happens. All right. What even was I doing? I was working on the train height table. Oh no, I haven't recompiled yet since then. Okay. It was. I don't know what it was. What's going on, people? It's probably not my usual crowd since it is 6 a.m. in California, which means all my Bay Area audience will not be tuning in. Bank holiday in UK. I know, that's where I am. I'm in a hotel in London right now. I never understood the phrase bank holiday. I mean, I understand that it's historical, but why would you define your life by when banks are closed or open? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me, you know? I just don't get it. The thing about England that never ceases to amaze me, or London maybe it's only London, is just all the drunk teenagers walking around at like not even that late at night. Like at 10:30 p.m., London is like a swarm of drunken 19-year-olds. It doesn't make any sense to me. This is hot chocolate, actually. It's all of the UK. Why is it all of the UK more so than other countries? It doesn't make any sense to me. That's Europe. Well, I was just in other parts of Europe and it doesn't feel the same as when you're walking around London. Even more than in the Nordic countries. Yeah, I mean, I've been to Copenhagen a couple times and I've been to Utrecht and I didn't notice this kind of thing there at all. Although maybe I wasn't around late at night as much, I don't know. But it's like, how are there so many more teenagers and how are they all drunk? It doesn't make any sense. Except that people don't have anything to do aside from drink. You could buy alcohol at 19, 18. Okay, that is a difference. Yeah, that is one thing that I notice here is people just drink here way more than they do in other countries. Like, I think people drink way too much in the US, but people in England drink way more And they also look really haggard and tired at the age of like 35. So I think those two things are related. Central London is full of bars and clubs. Heading to Zone 2 and beyond, it's much quieter. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I'm pretty much, I'm like near the Banks tube station, but I mean, this doesn't feel like a nightclubby area. It feels like a downtown area that is mostly shut down at night. I don't know. Tons of office workers all in uniform getting drunk every day. Well, I'm sure that happens too. How fat are my ass nodes? They're pretty fat. They're pretty fat. I want to reduce them at some point. In fact, some of what I'm doing now is reducing some of them. Bank holiday weekend, everyone's getting drunk. Yeah. Yeah, it's just that I remember because I've been to this country a number of times, and I just notice drunk people every time. It's just what it means to be here, I guess. How do I tell how many people are in chat? Oh, I'm interested to know because I can't tell. The Twitch client doesn't tell me. 149. Oh, that's decent. All right. You know, it's 6 a.m. at home. I don't usually stream at this time. Are you doing language or codec stuff? We're doing language stuff just because I want to test the Wi-Fi at this hotel to know how well it works. If it works well enough, we may do codec stuff. The problem is I was hyped to do codec stuff yesterday and we couldn't do it. So today I might be more tired and less hyped, but maybe tomorrow. It still says 0 dropped frames. Is it smooth for everybody? We're at 1080p, 30 FPS, 2 kilobits per second, which is less than we usually do, but is probably fine for programming. That's working well now. Okay. How long am I in London? I don't know. The audio is bad. All right, let's try turning up the audio quality because it's turned down from before. That might just be the microphone on this laptop though. Like, because it's the year 2020 and I paid $4,000 for this laptop, you can't expect it to actually be good. I mean, 96 kilobits should be fine for voice. You could up it to 160. I don't know if that actually takes effect because this is software. But let me know if that's any better. While we're here, I was going around between conferences. Yeah, so unfortunately I can't do much about the quality of the microphone on this laptop, and I did not pack a spare microphone. Did I know $sign is a valid character for names in C and C++? No, I thought $sign, doesn't that initiate a trigram or something? Or no, is it? I forget what it does. The audio sounds like a conference call. That's unfortunate. Maybe because the thing is, if I want to do a stream for the codec stuff, I want that to go on YouTube in high quality later. And that would require getting a high quality recording, which I can't do if the microphone is jacked. So I'll take a listen after this is over to just see what the quality's like. And if it's too low, maybe I'll try to buy a better mic somewhere while I'm here, because I'm here for a number of days. It's just I wish I'd packed a mic. okay, $4,000 laptop. They can't afford to put a good mic in it, or a good keyboard, or a good trackpad, or a good screen, or a good GPU. Actually, the GPU is probably fine. The way it's hooked up to the rest of the machine is not fine. Phone headset might work. Yeah, I don't have really a phone headset. Mic. Yeah, let's check the settings on the mic. Not that. Oh God, it's this in it. Stop it. Testing. I mean, we could turn the volume up to the music. Maybe we can turn it down. We have at least a 10 decibels. Now we have to use the 0 decibel. See, this is what I'm talking about. Why is having my volume 50? But my definitely turns it down here. What happened to the venue I was just on? Why are they making this? Is that better? Is that better? See, why should I go lower than 80? Like, why is 100 not the right setting? Like, why does this make any sense? 80 is great. Turn on amp. That's what we had before, though. All right, we're going back to this. How's this? That's good. We're back to what everyone was complaining about before, but it's good now. See, I just had to do something terrible so that everyone would appreciate what they have. Like, seriously, look at how many different. This is what I'm talking about when I say software is so bad. I mean, actually, not really, because there's no like deliberate bug here. But look at how many different screens I had to go through, and how many different mic volume adjustments there are, and how I don't know what they all have to do with each other. It just doesn't make any sense. Any chance I've seen the old TV series Connections? Yes, that's a good TV series for sure. For sure. Like what? This UI is so bad, dude. There's like this and this and this, and then of course OBS, and probably there's still other sound volumes. Oh, of course there's this one, right? If you go into, there's this one, which is of course totally different. This is for speaker, but there's a way you can get it. The way you can get it to be the microphones that I don't. There's a secret way to flip it to microphones. Maybe they took that out. It's a disaster, guys. You understand Microsoft's new obsession with making the UI harder to use by spreading it over a million different pages? Because they had to make it work with touch controls on a phone, even though they very rapidly failed to sell any phones, right? So they had to ruin everybody's desktop by making the UI usable on a phone. Apple is closest to the ideal of just works. No, it isn't. No, Apple isn't. All right, let's do some actual work. I tried to improve the sound. It was not to be done. So last time we were streaming compiler stuff, we were doing, we were converting some of these, how do I explain? There was complication in the way that declarations worked in the system. So something like a using or something like a static if would like make a dummy declaration so that it could do bookkeeping later about where to insert things when it evaluates. Like these things, it was starting to get really complicated and I couldn't hold it in my head and it was very hard to make modifications. So I embarked on this simplification wave. And we did a bunch of that. In fact, the last streams that I did from San Francisco involved fixing using to work in this new system. And so I think using is simpler and more reliable and more robust now. So during this trip a little bit, when I've had time to program, I went through the rest of the list that we made at that time of like, what other things can we do this way? Well, maybe an import link. I haven't done that yet. Maybe placeholders, which I did over the past couple of days. Maybe overloads. And I started doing overloads using this system. So then if there were a bunch of procedure overloads in a scope, then instead of a declaration, you would have like an overload set bound to that name in the scope. And I basically just about finished it. And then I said, wait a minute, I don't actually like this. Because the more I thought about it, like you could think of overloads as two different kinds of things. You can think of it as when you look up this name, there's a bunch of different declarations that it's bound to. Or you could just think of an overload as a value, as there's one declaration, there's one name, and it's bound to a value that's a compound set of procedures. Let me figure out what angle my camera should be at. Oh, that's fine. So maybe I should turn down the backlighting back there. I don't know which light switch that is. Anyway, so I decided, you know what, it's probably very important for the namespace system in this language to be as simple as possible because we hang so many features on it and we want to increase the number of features that we hang on it. So instead of doing overloads by making namespaces more complicated, why don't I just make it a value? And so I started rewriting all the stuff that I did to have this thing called overloads expression. I'm gonna shorten this name later to just overloads, but the namespace version was called ast overloads, and I want to make sure I get rid of the old code before doing the new thing. So I'm just in the middle of that, and right now the compiler doesn't compile, and I just need to repair the damage, and then it probably won't run correctly because I did this on an airplane and a train over a day and a half. and we'll just have to figure it out. And also, there's going to be a substantial amount of simplification, because when we look up identifiers right now, identifiers have some stuff on them. Like there's this overload set thing, and that is sort of making up for the fact that overloads aren't a value, and an identifier can have this array on it and stuff. And it's like, okay, wait a minute. If overloads become a value, we can get rid of this redundant thing and we can just have it bound to that value. So that's where I'm at. Are there any questions about that? Does that make sense to people? Does it not make sense to people? I can't even tell. I can't tell if people stop chatting or if my Twitch client died, as it always does. I need to reload it. I'm going to type test. Oh, I saw chat. Okay. Okay, people are saying makes sense, sort of. I don't expect you to follow too closely because I'm talking very fast over a number of issues, right? Okay, good. People are still there. So that's just what we're going to do today. It's kind of casual. We're not like, we're not implementing a new feature that's awesome. We're just, we're improving the functionality of what we already had. That's all we're doing. Does using work nice with polymorphic types? Well, you can't use. Yeah, I think you need to ask the question more specifically, because there's a number of ways that could happen, right? Are you saying using a thing that's polymorphic inside like somewhere like a top level namespace or a non-polymorphic procedure, or do you mean having it using inside a polymorphic like struct or procedure that needs to get evaluated when it polymorphs, right? Like, there's a number of different things with that question. Yeah, it's hard to follow if you only catch the streams once in a while. Totally, I bet it is. How do overloads react to using? I think again you need to be more specific about the question. What do you mean? What do you mean overloads react to using? Like in what scenario? Do you mean if I have a procedure in my namespace and I'm using something else that has the same name, like a procedure of the same name? In that case, it would become an overload in my namespace, because one would be the remote imported thing and one would be the local one or whatever. Or if you're using multiple things, you get an overload in your namespace of those multiple things, right? But if you were asking something else than that, then let me know. Inside a polymorphic procedure when it's instantiated. It should just work fine. It should work totally fine. If it doesn't, it's a bug. We definitely do that in code that exists right now, and it works great. Because essentially when you polymorph something, it just goes back into the compiler pipeline as if it had just been parsed. So it's really not that different from if you had typed in a procedure with those specific types. Implementation detail-wise, it's a little bit different, and there's definitely bugs that could happen, but they're just bugs, and we can fix them. They're just simple bugs, like, well, when we polymorph this thing, the state wasn't exactly as it would have been after you parsed it because we messed something up, and so we failed to do something. Like, that could happen, but it's not like a serious language problem. It's just like, well, I got to go change a line of code somewhere. That's what you meant. Okay, good. It seems weird for data segment patch to live in ask.h. Well, the thing about C++ is the more header files you have, the slower things are. So what are you going to do? All right. So this is not going to compile because it says asked expressive. There's no way. That's not a thing. So this is the thing, actually, where if you try to add something to a scope and there's already something in that scope by that name, if they're compatible and can be put into an overload, then we put them together. Otherwise, we don't. And I was in the middle of working on this, and I was going to make this routine called combine overloads that doesn't exist yet. And so in this case, it's like if the old one is an overload set, the new one may be a procedure, or it may also be an overload set. So combine overloads is going to handle a thing where this argument is always overloads, and this one may or may not be overloads. So we're just, to simplify the job for right now, we're farming that part, unsolved part of the problem out. So here's the thing that we have to handle, which is annoying, which is you could like import the same stuff multiple times. And right now we're allowing that and saying that that's not an error. And so we detect and deduplicate in an overload set, we detect and deduplicate multiple instances of the same procedure. Maybe we shouldn't do that in the long term, but for now, that's what we do. And so in this case, where they're both procedures, I'm just going to say, well, you know, actually we just did that. If they're the same, oh, okay. I had just changed this to bool, and I haven't actually changed this to bool. So we're returning bool about whether we successfully handled it. If we don't say we successfully handled it, maybe these aren't procedure types that could be overloaded, and the outer system needs to report an error, right? So if it's not an overload, we return false, saying we didn't handle it. And actually, we always return true here. I said return combine overloads before because I was returning the object. But the thing is, sometimes, like the reason I had to change it from returning the data structure to just a Boolean is in this case, we're not going to have, in this case, actually, if they're both equal, then we handled it, but we don't actually make an overload set because there was only one. So we just leave the old one. And so we don't have a new thing to return. So we're just returning bool. All right. So here, I'm going to say auto overloads is past new, past overloads expression. So what is that? That is this thing. And we're going to copy location info from, I don't really know, lambda old to overloads. I don't know, dude. Okay, and then we say, you fill these out, and then we're going to say overloads, overload list.add old new, and then expert old substitution is overloads. Will this work? I don't know. Okay. So expressions have a substitution slot where if we turn them into something else, we could just set that. Problem is, the type is going to change. Type is going to change. And then I think it's this. We'll see if that's right. Okay, so we're going to fill these out. We just say lambda is lambda old, and old imported by is entry old. Imported by, just storing that information. Oh, we can't say new because this is C++ and new is a keyword. Great. Great. Yeah, because you'd never want to use the word new. Why would you ever want to use the word new? Don't be an idiot. All right. This is very dubious. So the thing is, changing the type of the declaration that stores the old overload, you're not supposed to do that. You really are not supposed to do that. But I mean, there's a thing that we set. There's this locked flag that gets set. Okay, let's look at. But that's only if this has. I think we used to have an error that would prevent creation of overloads. Like, if we change the type and the type has already been used by someone, that's very bad, right? But there's nothing new about this. Like, that would have been a problem before if it's a problem now. So we just need to figure this out. Let me make a note there. I want to get the rest of the code so it's compiling. It's going to make a note in the to-do there and fix it. So all this stuff down here is like old stuff from the old version there. Okay, so basically everything from here to the bottom can go. Actually, I don't think we should set the type. See, I don't know what to do here. This is one of those confusions that I would like to eliminate. When I'm confused about what to do, it means things are too complicated. I'm just going to assert here. I'm going to assert that. That'll probably go off. Okay. So now we need to go write this thing, this combine overloads. And it's going to use some of this code that I just cut, but yeah, so this ensure not locked overloads. I did already write that, and that just asserts some things. Okay. Oops. Wrong language. I don't need to pass a pointer anymore. Okay. have this overloads mutex freaking annoying thing. That we're going to have to get rid of eventually. Making overloads a value is a good step toward getting rid of that, actually. It's very good. Okay. So these data structures inside here are different. Is it the lambda now? So let's, these calls now. And then, oh, it's not necessarily a lambda, right? That was the point. It's not necessarily a lambda. To add, it could be a lambda, or it's an overloads expression, all right? So, we'll do this thing here. If, do it this way, overloads expression. Combine single overload. All right, we're just gonna punt and brute force this. There we go. We need to set the enclosing scopes on these guys. I guess. No, we don't. That's the old way of doing things. Well, we'll see. So we're making a helper function to go with this one because we may want to call it on many things because of this. This is a pattern that happens a lot. Okay, so combine single overload. We're going to make that a lambda. We're going to go there. And here we'll say, oh no, okay, this is wrong. I practically sleepwalk through this. We'll say other overloads expression to add, right? Or let's call it overloads to add. And this is overloads to add here, and then we put them into the original overloads. I almost messed that up. Okay, so then we say overload list if it lambda is equal to add return, right? Otherwise, see all this busy work that we do just for a simple thing. It's kind of bananas. we're going to want to pass this as well. Let's go entry imported by. This is just information that we use in error messages. Like if you get something where it's like, hey, you know, this thing matches multiple overloads. You're trying to call a procedure and it matches multiple overloads. One of the things you might say is, wait, I didn't want there to be multiple overloads. Why? Why are there multiple overloads? And so you want to say who brought those overloads to be where they are in the namespace. And that's why we provide this information. Okay. So that's combine overload. Entry new imported by entry old imported by. I don't know. Let's try building that. We'll get some errors. How are things going in chat? Do I ever use smart pointers? No. I think smart pointers are not interesting or useful. And they have many downsides. Is there a reason for using two ints ORed together for the entity ID and the witness? We don't do that in the witness. We do that in the new game, not in the old game. No, I don't believe I said that the witness does that. I said the new game does that. The reason is because it works differently. So the two integers ORed together in the new system are basically a user ID and then a serial number for the entity within that level, right? In the witness, we would make sure that people don't simultaneously try to allocate the same entity ID just by allocating them separate ranges of IDs, right? The problem with that system in the new game is because it's a level-based game and there's tons of levels, you would have to have you would either have to have global ranges reserved for everybody across all the levels, which seems bad. You could have done that, I guess. Or you make their user ID part of the unique ID, and then nobody else will try to allocate the same number because their user ID is part of the number. That's all. It's just a way, it's just a way that we let multiple people work on the game without having to lock anything and coordinate in that way. Okay. I love these error messages. Cannot convert from as single overload to T with T equal to as single overload star. Couldn't you have just said that right there? I mean, I'm sure they did this format to deal with the kind of super bananas error messages like you get in STL, but this would have been better. For a simple case like this, just do the thing. Okay. Yeah, so the single overload, it really should be that. What do I mean by user ID? What is the user? Well, the user is, it's actually more like a login instance. So it's one particular account on one particular machine, right? So I use 3 or 4 computers, and so I have 3 or 4 different IDs. I could show you. I mean, hopefully there's no secure information. We have this user IDs file, and it's basically, so it's MAC addresses of all the machines. We had some bugs in it at one point, which corrupted people's usernames, but we have like the name, whatever their account name is on that machine, which is basically just here for debugging purposes. But you know, so here's one of my machines. I'm user ID 8 if I'm using that machine. Here are the MAC addresses for that machine. So every time you start the game, we look up our MAC addresses. We say, are those registered here? If they are, then we know what our user ID is. If they aren't, then yeah, this is like a frickin' Linux machine or something, which returns a zillion zero MAC addresses, or else there's a bug in the port of the MAC address code to Linux. I don't know. Anyway, yeah. I thought it might have been something to do with a character in the game. No, it's literally the only purpose is to be an integer that is different for every instance of the game that you might want to check in data from, right? So, yeah, I don't know what else to say about that. Why did that? Great. Now I've got to fix the fallout from what I just did. C++. C++. It doesn't waste people's time at all. No, not at all. Not at all, no. All right. So, more of the same, probably. Yep. So there are 4 loops. 4 loops. There's that one, I guess. Combine overloads. Argument 4 from expression to scope entry. Oh, because imported by, right, that's an expression. Sure. Sure. Although actually it's a scope. Make a note there. Okay. It's actually not always, I was going to say, I think it's always a scope entry, but a poke name is not a scope entry. Okay. I didn't finish this. make it a scope entry here. Oh, we never learn. Okay. So we haven't done enough work on this for it to actually function, but it does compile, so that's progress. That's good. That's good. Any questions about what I've been doing right here? Kind of cold in here. Check the. I think I'm going to boil some water for tea. It may be quite loud because the kettle is right here in this hotel setup, but at least they gave me a kettle. See how loud it gets. We'll talk about what this means in a second. These cookies are pretty good, I gotta say. I'm making myself a cuppa here in London. Let's have some Earl Grey. The problem is these are dainty English teacups. I need like a full-size American teacup. Look at this. How am I supposed to drink that much tea? Like, how does that even make sense? How do I declare a pointer to a function type or a pointer to a function? In the new language, you just put a star in front of it. Yeah, I turned the resolution back up to 1080. It was 720 before at the previous hotel Wi-Fi. I just, like, this is, look at this. Look how much tea that is. I had a lot of bad experiences in the Czech Republic this week, but they do tea very well there. They understand tea. I hate to say it, but the tea tradition in Czechia is clearly superior to the tea tradition in England, by me. I mean, what? What is this? All right. Yeah, maybe it's just this hotel trying to be fancy. No, but my favorite tea place based in the Czech Republic, the standard way they serve you tea is they give you a big ass thing like this full of hot water, except it's bigger, right? And they give you a teapot with really good tea, and you just keep pouring the water and refilling yourself for like 2 hours while you drink a ton of tea. It's really good. It's my favorite thing to do. Yeah, no, I'm serious. Like, tea is probably the best thing about the Czech Republic. Well, tea and the cinnamon swirly pastries. All right. So here's what happened. We ran this thing that says internal error and handle value and type table add. It's because I said the whole point was we're adding a new type of value. It's number 8 here in this enum, which is asked overloads expression, right? So now we're successfully constructing some overloads, but other parts of the compiler do not know what to do with them. For example, this thing here is type table add is how we make sure that the types of all our expressions are in the type table, which is the thing that holds the structs for runtime type information, right? Well, yeah. So we're saying to the type table, we have some value of type 8. It's like, I don't know what to do to make sure that that gets into the type table. So we have to go do something there. This may not be the only place. In fact, it's very likely not the only place where we have to add things. There's some switch statement here in type table add, and it's like, oh, the declaration, lambda, operator, whatever. So we need overloads expression in here. And I'm actually gonna I'm not sure. I'm just going to say I'm going to say we don't need to do anything. That might be wrong. Okay, declaration claims to be constant, but uses an expression that is not constant. Okay, so that is an overload again. So what's happening? I mean, this is one of these weird things where our syntax tree node only has one slot for a location, whereas overloads have many locations. And rather than complexifying the syntax tree node to hold many locations, I think maybe what we do is we have the error reporting routine do something different. Like maybe it checks, because we pass the whole syntax tree node to the error reporting routine so that it can report locations on that node. And maybe that thing just checks if it's an overload. And if it is, then say, here's all the locations. But anyway, uses an expression that is not constant. I think that just needs to understand overloads. Although the type is not set correctly. interestingly. Let's see what happens there. What's my freaking... What happened to my watch window? It's not under window, it's under view, other windows. Right? No? Where's my freaking watch window? Oh, wait, it's up here. See, I'm trying to do work. I never wanted Visual Studio to not give me a watch window, but for some reason it's gone now. I don't know why. I can't type any values now. Watch is under debug. Oh, I see. Debug Windows. No. No, it's not. They must have moved it between versions. You need to be in debug mode. Are you kidding me? Oh, right. Oh, never mind. I thought the debugger was running. Okay, duh. That's me being tired and jet lagged. I mean, I would prefer it if the watch window didn't disappear. I would prefer it if these all just stayed and it just said, look, this isn't enabled in debug mode. And then I wouldn't have been confused. I thought I was in debug mode. Okay. So I was like, why can't I type into the watch window? It's gone. I didn't notice that threads and breakpoints and all those other things were gone. Wow. See, drinking this weak English tea is really, it's not strong enough to power my brain, I think, is what we're discovering. We need the Czech tea for the brain power. All right. So it does have a type. I probably just don't set it. Is it void? No, but it's something. Polyuse? Let's just see. This would be set here. It doesn't look like anyone sets this. So my question is why? What is it? Okay, hold on. Let's stop making assumptions. The type definition. What? What? Okay, so we're not. Oh, you know what? No. I set this breakpoint. We're not at the place we're trying to investigate. We're at the first time we hit a declaration in this code. Okay, that was stupid. So now we're reporting the error. Okay, we have a lambda. Interesting, it is a lambda and not an overload, which is confusing me. This might just be that I changed this code too hastily because oh, we have a oh God. Oh God. Okay. I made a boo-boo. Remember when I said when we make this new overload set, we're going to make a substitution from the expression. Where was that? What file were we in when we did that? Was it in scope? Yeah. So the problem with this is that substitution is now in play for like anyone who evaluates that lambda ever, which is not what we want. Not at all what we want. So the answer to will this work, I don't know, is no, it will not work. What we want to do is say entry old expression is overloads. I still don't know if that's going to work. Well, entry old doesn't have an expression because it's a scope entry. So we cast it to a declaration. We do that. So now we're asserting, well, that there's an inferred type, which makes sense because I just said we aren't setting the type on this thing. Yeah. So if that's an overload set, we're not, whoops, overload expression. Overloads set inferred type. Let's do it this way. Overloads inter type def overload set. This is just a type that we reserve. All overloads are the same type right now. That may not be a good idea in the long term. We may want to make specific types that represent each overload set, but that involves some extra work, and it's unclear that we really want to undertake the overhead. In fact, that's why I did overloads as a namespace hack originally, because I was like, we don't want to manufacture all these extra types and things just for doing queries. So yeah, I don't know. Probably wasn't the right decision. Sometimes things are the right decision for a while and then they stop being the right decision. Okay. Still asserting, so let's actually look at the problem then. What do I think about the new AMD CPUs? I don't care. Dude, your computer today would be 1,000 times faster if people wrote software better. Like, that's not an exaggeration. So getting a CPU that's like 20% faster or something, it's like, who cares? Like, literally, who cares? It doesn't matter. Like, all you're doing is running JavaScript on the CPU anyway. Who cares? Like, why do you need it to be faster? You already decided you don't want your computer to be fast. You know what I'm saying? I don't mean you personally, obviously, but like the collective you. What tea do I normally drink? It depends on where I am. Like at Borderlands, I had a favorite tea, but Borderlands is closed. At home, I have a stash Earl Grey that I like. But there's also Bengal Spice. It's a perennial favorite. Am I giving a talk in the UK? We're doing just like a 20-minute interview. So this conference had 20-minute time slots, which seems really pointless to me. Like I don't know how to really say that much that's useful in 20 minutes. So I decided not to try. So we're just doing like an interview format. It's probably not going to be that interesting, honestly. I also, though, I was like, oh, it's going to be the third conference that I'm at. So, like, I don't want to prepare yet another thing. In fact, I even thought I thought that I was going to prepare less for the Czech conference and then I prepared more than I expected. Um, but this one is literally no prep. I just walk in and do an interview for 20 minutes and it's a complete waste of everybody's time. But whatever. That's how they wanted to run their conference. Okay. So what declaration is it? I'm sure it's probably an over, well, I'm not sure, but uh, line 53 of basic. Line 53. Alloc. Okay, well, that is certainly overloaded, right? Um, overloads expression. So the problem is if we set the type when we construct it, we won't do that check for redundant overloads. It happens in the type checking phase, which is annoying. Um, could do that later, honestly. It's a little bit of a hack that we do it in type. It's not really, I guess it is a type checking operation. I don't know, man. But it doesn't really matter where we check for that error. I kind of burned my thumb on the steam from that teapot. Okay, so we're getting we need to set the type of this ink. I have many questions. One question is, why was this not set? And I believe the answer is that we probably substituted this after the thing was flattened, which is like another complication that I prefer not to have that we'll need to think about at some point. So if we go back to the expression, it's got these flattened withins, and I bet those are like -1. Yeah. So this never got flattened in anything, but the declaration itself is flattened because no, not there. Yeah. That's one of the things, this whole system where I flatten stuff, I'm very close to concluding that it's not the right way to do this because it has many drawbacks. This is one. So we need to say that our declaration needs to get re-flattened. It's annoying and stupid to have to do that. But we did change the expression on it. Why was it flattened already, though, is the question. Because this overload generation stuff Should be happening earlier in the compilation than that. Like, it should be happening before we try to figure out the types of anything. So I'm not sure why this occurred. Or maybe that's not what happened. Maybe when we flattened, we just didn't put the overload expression. Like, and we didn't report an error, but it was unhandled. Well, we have asked overloads expression here. Oh, okay. We flatten all the lambdas in there, but we don't flatten the thing itself. Okay. So we need to do this finish. I put this right under declaration, and declaration was like a special case that has like special handling. That normally you're supposed to do this and that. Like that. Okay. That is probably the real problem. Certainly not the only problem. All right. Too many arguments, wanted 0, got 1. So what's happening now, I don't know why there's a free with 0 arguments, but we'll take a look at that. I don't know why there's a free with 0 arguments, but like I said, we did all this thing where we changed how overloads work, but like overload resolution probably isn't doing the right thing now. So we need to make it do the right thing. We need to make it understand the new thing that we did. I'm curious though about why is there a 0 argument version of free? That just seems banana cakes to me. Frozen? Uh-oh. Yeah, we definitely dropped some frames, but it looks like it's back. Is it back for everybody? Okay. Well, this assertion's going off, so actually we'll debug that as well. No proc expression. Operator expression? What? What? Oh, right. Any basic dot free. So this should have a substitution. Yep. Okay, so this is an overloads expression. So I think it's saying 0 because we're getting this overloads expression and we're not like looking at the individual procedures. So like args wanted up here. This is supposed to be argument declarations. Like, it's kind of weird to me that we got that far down without it starting up somewhere higher. But yeah. Anyway, we're not going to worry about that yet. That's no surprise that that doesn't work, because we're trying to take this set of overloads without picking the right procedure out of the overloads and then trying to call that. And that's not how you call a specific procedure. But we have to fix this. Although maybe this doesn't matter. Maybe it does. See, I think this is illegal, what's happening here. And if it's illegal, we may have some code that is not good. Well, if it's illegal, first of all, we have to report it as an error. But then that would also mean that our code is not good. So this is imported by a using at line 18 of project generator. Okay, well, that's just an import. So that should have just worked. Why? What is decal old? 727 of string. Okay. See, we're supposed to, the rule is, we're supposed to perform all the loads of everything before we start inferring anything. That's the law of the land. It's maybe not the best law for long term. But that is how it's supposed to work. And so for anything that's just flat in a file, like, oh, this isn't a static if. Okay. Yeah. No, it's not an aesthetic if. Dude, I don't even know. I don't know why. Maybe I broke that part of things. I don't know why this is being allowed to have its type inferred. I'm tempted to just ignore this and plow ahead, but this could be a conceptual problem in the compiler in some way. So we're going to need to investigate this. Oh, sorry, it dropped out again. It looks like we're dropping a lot of frames right now. It looks like it also just stopped. So we'll just see. Let's see if it's bearable. Okay. No, I get what's happening. This is potentially a serious problem in the compiler. And it was already there before. After our recent using rewrite, it's just it was not so easy to detect because the situation was more confusing. But now we can see it because we've cleaned up the code. So the problem is import directives used to insert their names. Like when you would say import whatever like this, then that import directive used to parse its namespace and then do an insertion itself. All right. I changed that when we did the using rewrite. I changed it so that this desugars into, like if you say import sort, hey, look, we're importing sort twice. I don't know why we're doing that. But if you said like import sort, it would be something like, using anonymous, whatever. It's as if you did this, but without a name there, right? And the thing is that using, in general, doesn't know what the thing is on the right-hand side and needs to resolve that. So usings like this fire at type checking time, okay? Problem, many problems. So first of all, the reason why I changed it to work that way is that, like, say you just did this, right? That should, in theory, be equivalent to just saying import sort, right? So the idea was like, look, this is shorthand for this. You could do either of these things, okay? The problem with saying you could do either of those things is that this one requires some type checking to happen because you need to know what sort is. You need to be able to look up that identifier. Once you allow type checking to start happening, once you start looking up identifiers, then you can't necessarily change anything that's been looked up, right? And if you have a declaration for a procedure, once you start doing this, then if you change the declaration for that procedure to make it into an overload of multiple procedures, then you're in trouble because you've introduced something that makes previous things that have happened wrong. Do people understand what I'm saying there? And it's order dependent. Like if you were to randomly compile things in a different order, which you need to be able to do for high performance threaded compiling, you would get a different result, right? And so the design of this was originally, well, this thing does its own insertion so that all the names just get pulled in before any types get computed. And so by the time you're in the business of computing types and looking up identifiers, all these overloads have happened, right? Problem is I don't know what to do. I don't know how to solve this right now. And it's important to solve. Maybe we just ignore it for a little bit because we want to get this working again and checked in, but we can't ignore it forever because it's actually a serious problem in the language semantics. Like I need to decide, like, is there some way that this really can be the same as this? Or are they inherently different? And if they're inherently different, are people going to be aware that if they do this, that overloading doesn't work? Is that going to seem weird? Dude, overloading sucks. Let me put it this way. I do so much work in this compiler just to make overloading work that I would almost rather not have it. The problem is you sort of need it for math operators. For everything else, I would be fine just not having overloads and force you to use separate names for everything. Oh my God, it makes the compiler slower because when you find the definition for a procedure, you can't assume that's the correct one. You have to keep looking all the way up to the top of the namespace. Yeah, I'm going to redo the presentation about the reasons to write a codec. I'm going to redo that later too when we're on a good connection, which it's starting to seem like this is not a good enough connection either, even though it's better. So this may wait until next week when I'm at home, which is a bummer, but it's also fine. You know, what's 1 week delay? It's no big deal. Why wouldn't overloads work for the using case? Okay, let me try to explain again, because I don't know if anyone else is going to be able to explain it to you. Let me try to explain. Okay, to do a using like this, right? This thing on the right-hand side, it could be any expression, right? Right here, it's an identifier, okay? Well, this thing that we're using could be anywhere, right? It could be any file. It could be of any type. You know, it could be a pointer to something. It could be something that's invalid to use, and you would need to report an error, right? So this is like a general expression here, okay? So just imagine even that this lives in a different file somewhere. In order to figure out what we're trying to use, we need to look up this name and see what this name means. What does the word sort mean? I don't know. It's something somewhere in the program, okay? When you start looking up names, okay, let's say, for example, I looked up this name sort, and I didn't find it in this scope, I went up and up, and then all in the global namespace, I found a name called sort way up there. I'm like, oh, that's what we're using. And I go off and use that, right? Fine. But then later on, after I do that lookup, somebody in my scope adds a symbol called sort. Okay? That should be illegal because if they had happened to add that symbol called sort before I did the lookup, I would have got a different answer, right? So in general, there's this issue of when you look up names, the namespaces need to be stabilized, all right? Now the problem is, well, one of many problems is when you do usings like this in top level, by definition, that can't be true because they start by looking in their own namespace and they're not stabilized. Like, I even forget, like in theory, if you have multiple usings in one namespace like this, they should all refuse to fire. And I forget what I did to make that true, to make that not true, right? Because no, if you have two things like this, using sort and using whatever, right? In principle, this should probably be illegal because you don't know what either of these is yet. If you do using whatever and it adds a name called sort, then that would change the result of this. So you should have to do this one first. If you do it using sort and it adds a name called whatever, that could change the result of this. And so you should have to do this one first, right? You can't do either one first. So that's a problem. Now, I thought about this before, and I believe I came up with a serious workaround for it, but I honestly don't remember what that is. And so let's go look in our clarity file. I don't think it's in there. But, oh man, why can't I? Is it just here? No. Thought I had a clarity file that. Oh, why? Okay, this is what. Thanks, Emacs, for changing my window back that I specifically dragged. Okay. Hey, look, its first one's about overloading. Okay, no, this is about constant versus non-constant. And I came down, overloading non-constant things was so bananas that I outlawed it. So it's only constant things. Haha. When you say import whatever, we used to do a using, but we don't now because it's easy for users to deadlock waiting for each other in the case of mutual imports. Really, we want the old semantics of stuff getting dumped into the namespace it happens. Even if we change back to using import whatever for anonymous modules, there should probably still be the behavior and an explanation will be in order. Not so easy though. Yeah, well, that doesn't really help me. So certainly this is a problem that I've thought about before several times. Like this is just, I would like to figure out a way to do this that is not inherently a problem. Why not restrict using to only appear at the start of the scope? This language doesn't work that way. It doesn't matter where you are in a declarative scope. We don't have order of declaration like in C or C++, thankfully. There's a number of things that I could do. Like, for example, if we said usings have to evaluate first or something, which I believe we do, then when we do identifier lookups in this scope, we could record like a poison identifier and say, hey, this using whatever had to look up the identifier whatever, but sort, or no, if we did this one first, right, we look up the identifier whatever, it's in a parent scope. Maybe on the way up to the parent scope, we leave little poison identifiers that say nobody is allowed to put something called whatever here. It's illegal. I think that would solve the problem. I'm a little bit worried about how complicated that might be to implement, but I think it would be fine. So then this kind of a thing would be legal as long as neither one adds something that would change the value of the other one. That seems like the right answer to me. So maybe that's what we're going to end up doing. You don't get it. Well, maybe somebody else could try explaining it to you. It's a basic problem. It's a very basic problem. And that's really the only solution that I've ever thought of that really solves that problem. We're going to ignore it for now and hope that it doesn't screw up our compilation, because I want to finish this overload situation. Um, but it is a problem. So to make this work, then we would also have to say, there's some kind of special situation where usings always have to evaluate before anything else, which I think is fine. Yeah. It's interesting because, the C way of doing it, which is just like, hey, we do things in the order that they are encountered in the text, right? That's very simple and it solves all these problems, but it's very restrictive and we're trying to get away from that, right? And so we're doing all this additional work to make something that provides a better programmer experience. Okay. Are there any questions about that particular discussion? Because I think we're going to set that aside. We're going to turn off this assert for now, and we're going to hope that we are able to compile a working program without this being a problem in practice, and then go fix it afterward. Why can't I drag this anymore? You would expect it to resolve the first one, and then if it declares a symbol whatever, when it encounters using whatever, it'd be an error. I mean, that's a different version of the same thing. Like one way or another, you have to track what was added when, and we don't do that right now, right? Yeah. Isn't the reason C does that mostly for ease of parsing? Yes. Well, the type information thing in C is a little bit of a red herring. That is a problem with being able to parse C, but even if that wasn't a problem in the C grammar, it would still be single pass top to bottom because that's how all old programming languages work. There's nothing unusual about that. Would it be possible to cut out the variable name and just say using import sort? Yes, you can do that right now, but you want to allow people to do the other thing. I mean, using import sort is just the same as import sort. Like that's what this means. It's interesting because this idea of leaving little poison pellets in the namespaces could be enhanced to speed things up, maybe. Because, say if you're in a procedure and you look up the function f like 50 times, and it's like 8 namespaces above you, that's a little bit slow, right? But if your poison pellet, if you left it for everything all the time, which I'm not sure is a good idea, but if you left it for everything all the time, then the pellet could say the final declaration of this symbol is at this particular place. And then you wouldn't have to search up the namespace, right? You could just store the final thing right there. So that's a possibility. I feel like that might speed things up a lot. But it also involves using a lot more memory. I'm not sure if that's good. It might be good though. Top level declarations need to be processed in order always. Nope, no they don't in this language. Why not add an overload keyword to function declaration? I mean, the problem is that you might just use a bunch of different modules. Like say you use a module A that has like a deallocate function for some structure, and then you use a module B that has a different deallocate function for its own structure, right? Neither of those will be marked overload, but you're trying to use both of them in the same namespace. So you don't want to have to change the program text to mark those as overload. Do you know what I mean? And also, even if you did add an overload keyword for like, just imagine that all the source code was your own source code instead of modules that you're using. You still don't know when you have all the overloads because, you know, like overload resolution picks the best match out of all the possibilities. What if a better match comes along later, right? So you still have to know when you're supposed to be done. So I like this, making the language more robust in this way. It's a little bit scary, but I'm going to write it down on the list of things that we're going to hopefully do while I'm here in London. We'll at least try it. We'll at least try it, see if it makes things slow or causes problems. Because we could just do it only in the case of running a using. But we also, if that works well, we could do it globally. All right. Using poison pill system. So functions are not namespaced, question mark. I don't understand the question. Everything exists in a namespace always. So what do you mean by functions are not namespaced? Okay. We are gonna try to solve this situation. I hope I didn't mess up the actual file. Okay, now we still get the same error. Good. Oh, this is not no jobs, which is why I didn't insert it in the same place. Yeah. If we know jobs, then we assert the inferred type is null. thought you heard that a name collision could occur if two functions share the same name in different imported modules. No, the point is you have a couple of different usings or imports that are pulling those names into your own module, right? You're saying, I want to use both of these modules from where I am. So my viewpoint combines the names of these other two places. Right? If you don't do that, if you just want to dereference everything through the module name, then you don't have that problem. But this is for when you do want to do that. Man, using sucks. I should just not have it in this language. Using sucks and overloads suck. What if I got rid of using? How bad would that be? Probably wouldn't be that bad, honestly. And then this import case wouldn't be done with a using anymore. It would just be the old style where the import does the name importation itself. Using is great. How would you do namespace importing for structs? What are you talking? I don't know what you're even asking. How would you do? Oh, you mean if I got rid of using? Well, you wouldn't. What about disallowing using in certain scenarios? I mean, it's just complicated already by itself. So having to support it in some scenarios is sort of like having to support it in all scenarios. I think we're going to keep making it work, but yeah, it could be simpler. If you really want a procedure to be namespaced locally, you could still do a : module.a. Yeah, you could do that. What's the advantage of using besides having to type fewer characters? It's basically just having to type fewer characters. I mean, like I'm saying, you can make overloads with it, but that's also just a different way of having to type fewer characters. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's really funny because, like, you know, right now I'm spending all this effort battling compiler complexity, and I'm just like, wow, these couple of features are adding a large percentage of the complexity. I'm not sure if they're worth it, honestly. I'm really not. But let's get some more water and make some more tea. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, fewer characters is great sometimes. So I want to keep it working. Let's let this go for a second. How hard would it be to add using later when you sort other things out if you stop sorting now? Well, the thing is we use it a lot. So we'd have to change a bunch of code if we took it out. It's just, it makes me sad how complicated it is to support, that's all. Like, I feel like it's not that worth it in terms of my quality of life building the compiler, but the thing is, you know, if people get a lot of benefit out of it when they're programming, then that'll pay off eventually, you know. We'll see. Okay. So we're gonna, for now, we're gonna turn this assertion off. Just that one. And just gonna hope that holds us together. Whoops. Holds us together for long enough to finish the rest of the thing, and then we'll figure out what to do there. Okay, so now we're back to too many arguments. 1 at 0 got 1. This is no surprise whatsoever, because we're not using our new value correctly when we collect overloads. It's a bit framey. Yeah, I'm sorry about the stream quality. It says that we've dropped about 10% of the frames. But it switches back and forth between being perfect and then dropping a lot. So, I don't know. I don't know, people. It's the best I can do while I'm traveling. Okay. So we have to solve this, and we have this collect overloads for an identifier. I need to write down some things to check later. I need a better pen than the one that the hotel gave me. Like when I write with certain kinds of pens, my writing gets very ugly. When I write with this pen, it is not ugly, in my opinion. Yeah, it's still followable most of the time. Okay, that's good. I still feel like I don't want to try and do the codec one until I get home, because of many issues like that, and then the microphone quality and all that. So that's going to have to wait till next week, I think. It's definitely better than the last hotel. Okay, so get another room. That one ran out. It got weak. So this is that thing, like this waiting on inserters is how we prevent trying to look up a name if there are still usings that are going to fire in that scope. That's how that works. Yeah. I'm getting hungry. Eventually, we're going to take a break so I can go try to find some food. People here who live in the UK, do I have a chance of going out and finding food on spring bank holiday, or is it a disaster? Okay. So this mix into overloads is what we get to down here. And first we're going to make it work with this old system. And then eventually we will get rid of the extra stuff on identifier, maybe. Maybe not. McDonald's is always open. Usually good for food restaurants as many people go out. Okay, that's good. That is good. So maybe what we'll do is we'll take a break soon. I'll go eat, and maybe we'll do another stream later tonight. Because I'm probably not going to be able to stream too much over the next few days because there's a conference, although probably not going to attend everything at the conference. Okay. So this was the old system of dealing with if the scope entry was of type overloads. So here, okay. See, this is super annoying because we have the same case now where it's like the scope entry that we're pointing at. See, we used to loop around this way back here, but this isn't the right place to do it anymore. We have to do it like in here. We're not really structured to do that. Other idents might have an overload list. Yuck. We've got like two separate, completely separate universes of overload lists. See, this overload list that's on identifier, I don't think we want it to have scope entry anymore. Let's start changing that. And that's going to cause some fallout. So here's what's going on. We have this overload set on identifiers representing what we've looked up. And it's got a collection of overload infos. Overload infos yeah. When you start adding all these features together, it gets complicated. Overload infos, they have the place that they originally looked it up because that was required. It will be required later if you're looking through a non-constant item. So if you're using a pointer to something, then the backend needs to know how to navigate that pointer to something to get to the thing that you're using. And so we say like, well, this is where that came from. This is maybe replaceable by the imported by that we had in the other system. Like, I believe that's the main thing that that's used for. And then final decal here, I don't think we actually need that. Because we only would need that if it was non-constant, but we only allow overloads of constant things, which means I think that that could be a lambda. So let's try to simplify that. Because we're not saving those declarations. I mean, we could save the declaration location in our other overload set. Maybe that's fine. It's not. So in general, the declaration and the procedure itself will be at about the same place. The declaration is just the name with the colons or whatever, and the procedure is the rest of it. What do we use final decal here for? Do we use it at all anymore? No, decal expression. That's just the lambda, though. Yeah, see, this is doing extra work to just to get the lambda. So let's put that there. Is that the only reason we wanted that for? Yeah, and we're doing it a different way every time. We really just want the lambda. This type would be the type of the lambda as well. We could keep the declaration for debugging purposes. Let's do that. Final decal. We're going to change the name, which is going to force us to audit all the code that was using this. Final decal for error reporting, right? Because overloads only apply to constant procedures, we know where we know the final value of this entry. Scope entry. Actually, we don't need that because I said that in theory we need that in order to navigate through a using or whatever. But you don't actually need that if the thing at the end of the navigation is a constant, which it has to be. So my theory is we should be able to get rid of that. I'm going to put a note to do that though, because I don't want to do too many things at one time. Although maybe we're going to use that to report who imported the thing again. So maybe we want that there in some way. Anyway, I'm just going to, massage this information a little bit so that we're ready to collect it from the other thing. So yeah. So if we compile, we will get many errors, surely. And we'll fix them. So final decal s.cpp 1342. Right? That's all that is. Typer. We called that one, what was it? Final decal for error reporting. We're actually storing more info than we used to, which is maybe a little weird, but whatever, it's clarity. Okay, so for here we want to check the actual lambda. Okay, if there's no expression, we'll just report an error. Internal compiler error. So to say that, we're going to say here, wasn't a lambda, or for some reason it's the wrong type. So, so we get down here, set that, check against this. Okay. Delta lambda doesn't take. Right? What did I call it again for debug? For error reporting. For error reporting. Like that was excess work that didn't really need to happen. So that's simplified. Same here. Okay. So that actually didn't make our other job any easier because we still need to provide that declaration, but it's at least clear why. Like, okay, this is for error reporting. This is, okay, so the next thing, I wanted to see what blows up if I try to get rid of this. Not that much. Let's see, 1760. Now we're mixing a scope entry into the overloads, but we don't actually have to. We could just pass the lambda there, right? Like I think, yeah, like I think we don't drive this off scope entry anymore. I think it's, we just get the lambda. Let's try it. Because it's C++, we have to change it in multiple places. And that may make the structure amenable to doing the new version of this. Okay. Lambda. Come on. do it twice. It's C++. Gotta do it twice. Gotta do it twice. Okay. Yeah, all this can go away. Okay, I'm just going to cut all this and put it down at the bottom of the file because this probably isn't the right way to do this either. Like, if we have an identifier, so we're having this second copy of overloads on the identifier, and maybe let's not do that. Yeah, you know what? We're going whole hog. I was thinking that this was going to be a relatively small incremental change of the way this stuff works, but sometimes you just start changing things and you're like, it's gonna be more work to try to paste all this together. Like, let's just make the big changes. So we're making the big changes. So if we have an identifier and it's bound to an overload, then the value is just going to be overload. Well, okay, we're going to have to deal with it. So I'm making a note. To do this, and I'm cutting this out. And I'm putting it at the bottom of the file. We're going to come back to it later. Okay, so here we check and see, have we already got this lambda? If not, then we do this. Now this final decal thing, see, now we just don't even have that information. Yeah, you know what? Let's not even do that. If we want that later, we'll add it back. Because we basically, see, we're actually sort of addressing this comment up here. Yeah, no, non-constant overloads are just not a thing for the first version of the language. So we're actually going to get rid of that. We're just going to do this, and that should be the same most of the time. And in cases where it isn't, maybe we just on the lambda, because anytime you report an error for a lambda, you maybe want to say the declaration site if they're broken by white space. And so maybe that's something we solve globally anyway, instead of worrying about it here. Okay, so make single lambda into overloads. Right, we don't have that anymore. Lambda. Scope entry is gone. Okay. So we're still calling it with a scope entry here. And here is where we're going to need to handle that lambda later. We're going to assert for now. We're going to say okay, sorry, entry. So this seems redundant, but I'm not sure. Okay. So we've got an expression. Look at all those things. Okay. Okay, actually, eval to lambda. Same thing. So we need that. Okay. That's going to go off at some point because we will have an overload set here. No check-in, incomplete. This will fire at some point because we will get overloads. Instead of a lambda, we're not worrying about that yet. We're just going to try to put this together anyway. And scope entry is constant. I changed that. What? Entry final declaration is constant. Dude, this is what happens when I change things. It's into overload. Still. This one. Base decal. The hell is base decal? Didn't resolve scope entry. Okay. This is the first thing that the identifier is bound to. You know, all right, here's what we do. Here's what we do. Instead of this, we're going to say mix expression. Mix, be very clear, lambda or overload into overflows. Identical expression distance site yield upon. Okay. Okay, hold on. This was before that call. The reason we are doing this is so we could factor this to have it happen both times, because this other identifier also could have overloads. So down here we could say something like that. Oh my God, what a pain in the butt. So here we get an expression. And again, we're just going to punt on it if it's not a lambda yet. Well, actually, no, we could handle that now. So this is just this kind of busy work programming that's just like, why is it so much work to do this? I don't know. Maybe I'm just doing it wrong. What are all these arguments? Type mix into overloads. So we have an identifier, we have an expression, we have a distance, we have a site, a yield upon, and let's keep it simple. Okay. If we get anything but these, we will say port error expected a procedure or overload set here. Right. So lambda and then we just say mix into overloads of all this stuff, ident, lambda, distance, site, yield, upon, skip, if simple. Great. Okay. If it's okay, we already checked the type there, so we don't need to do it redundantly here. Okay. So if it's an overloads expression, we just mix each one separately, just like what we did before in the other place. It was a scope entry and not a declaration. I'm just going to assert this. Hopefully, that's fine. Maybe it's not. Look at all these errors. The errors just keep growing. say overload info lambda. Look at all these errors, 3993. Scope entry, lambda. Lambda. Maybe 27. A 47. See, I actually don't like this. We're going to have to undo this later. It's fine though. We're getting it done, and then we'll make it back. Like all this error reporting. We're gonna want to simplify it back, or not simplify it back, but give the right information. I made a little bit of the wrong call there. We're also just using these scope entries too often, more often than we needed, but we do need to put some of them back, unfortunately. Oh no! Crap. Okay, this is one, I didn't see this before, but here we actually need this. Because here we're doing overload resolution. We're looking on an identifier and we're like, hey, let's replace this set of overloads with one final one. And the way that we do that in this compiler is we set the scope entry. Like a scope entry is like a declaration, right? It used to be called resolve declaration. So we used to set the declaration of the procedure that that identifier resolved to, because identifiers map to declarations. I guess. So what we've been doing this whole time is sort of remapping these data structures so we can go end to end through the new overload representation. And we're not saving this information right now when we build an overload set. Which means there's no way for it to get here, which is not good. So I feel like it's about time for me to take a break and think about this and go get some food. Let's do some little on-topic Q&A. Are there any questions about what's been going on here? Any questions? This is, again, we're basically shredding the entire overload system at this point. This had started as wanting to make minimal changes, and it has now turned into completely shredding and replacing the overload system. It looks like we're dropping a lot of packets right now. Wait. All right. We just dropped a lot. Oh, come on, packets. Yeah. Okay. We dropped a lot of packets just now. So that may also be a signal that it's time to take a break. What I was saying before we drop the packets is, are there any final on-topic questions? Uber Eats won't cost $50. That is true. That is true. Oh, I bet if I Uber Eats here, I don't know if they have it here. Oh my God, we're dropping so many packets. This is crazy. All right. Really interesting, but definitely makes you want to stick with pre-built engines and focus on gameplay code rather than custom low-level stuff. I mean, the problem with that is, here's the thing. If you do that, if you stick with pre-built engines and stuff, you're limited to the quality of what those other people are willing to build. And my claim is that that quality is not going to go up over time. I think we're almost at peak quality of licensable engine. I don't think it's going to go up anytime soon. So it limits what you can do. That's probably fine. Yes, it is a lot of effort to do these things, but we're going to end up with the best programming language in the world. So what do you want? It takes some effort to do that. Like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't really discourage you from using an engine if you think that's the best way to get done what you want to get done. But again, I feel like we're in times when too many people decide to do that, and that's really bad. Because as I said in that talk, like if basically nobody knows what's going on anymore, we're not going to have a good time with computers in the future. So, yeah. Yeah. So for the example of UE4, that's thousands of experienced engineer man hours who all have experience in their fields who could not possibly hope to compete. Okay, this is an important point, actually. You don't have to compete with Unreal to make something that's much better than Unreal for your purposes. Because when, somebody like Epic has a really hard job because they have to make an engine that is good enough for lots of different people to use for lots of different purposes. That's way harder to do than to make something that is good at one purpose, which is all you have to do to ship a game, right? It means their job is really hard, but that means your job is not as hard as their job if you want to make an engine. That's all. But yeah, if you want to make a game, if you're not interested in making tools, then that's totally fine. Again. Like, it's like, dude, Unreal is way more work than anyone shipping a game actually needs to do. Like, it's probably 10 times the functionality, and that functionality has to be in each individual spot way more robust, right? It's probably like 50 times as much work as you actually need to do. It's a lot more. It's a lot more. But that's the difference between making a game and making a commercially licensable engine. It's just a different thing. All right, everybody. Thanks for stopping by. I'm going to think about what's the best solution to this. I think the solution is going to be to keep the scope entries around our other overload system. I kind of just want to put these together. Like right now, this overload info that we've been tweaking, this is the one that happens when we look up an identifier and we put results together. But then we also have single overload, right? And these should be the same thing. I think. I mean, maybe overload info has single overload in it, because these things are things that only happen when you're resolving the identifier. So maybe this has the lambda, the imported by, or maybe just the scope entry, and the scope entry has the imported by. And then this has a single overload in it. I think that's how we're going to do it. Let's just type this right now. Let's just go like this. This is going to be our new thing. And this is going to, again, make a bunch of fallout, but we're learning what the best answer is. And we're going to go like that. So these things are things that the identifier will want to do while handling the overload, but this is the data that it's going to get out of the thing, and that's going to have a scope entry in it, which we didn't. And before we forget, let's actually it's not the right place, but you know what? It doesn't matter. We're going to have to revisit all these sites anyway, because we say dot lambda on all of these, and that's not going to work anymore because we made it, dot single whatever. We're going to have to say dot single overload dot lambda. We'll just call it single. So we're going to have to go, all those sites that we just edited, we're going to have to go edit again. But we're getting better and better at what we do, so it'll eventually converge. See? And then I can make it use the scope entry in those error messages again, which was the thing I really wanted to do anyway. All right, thanks everybody, and we'll do another stream probably in a few hours. I don't know, some point. Should we try to host somebody? Let's see. We have Pokemon happening here. What do we have? So let's see. Let's see what's happening at 9 a.m. Pacific time. REST API, that's a no. Penny Arcade. What is that? Oh, web development. We don't do web development. Tiny pure functions. That doesn't sound good. I mean, the pure part is fine. The tiny part is not fine. Game development in Rust. All right, we'll do that. Thanks everybody for coming by. We'll see you later on. I don't have my other monitor. What is happening here? Just computers are bad. That's what's happening.